Are we ready then? Hello, Annie. Hello, Corey. Hello, Elliot. It's good to see you here. Hello, Lisa. Hello, Grandma. Hello, Helen. It's good to see you here. Hello, Kiara. You're Hello, Fiona. Hello, Henry. It's good to see you here. Hello, Magda. Hello, Anthony. Hello, Camilla. It's good to see you here. Hello, Joseph. Hello, Courtney. Hello, Sue. It's good to see you here.
Hello, who recognises that song? Who in here has heard that song several thousand times before? Yeah, me too. Okay, I'm Susanna Chambers. I'm Project Manager of the Learning Together study at Peeple. So thank you for the great introduction. I would like to say on behalf of Peeple how thrilled we are to have been invited to speak. I personally, having presented at probably 100 or so conferences during my career, am absolutely bowled over at being at a conference where I have rhinestones on my delegate badge. That never happened before, so that has absolutely topped it for me. And all the great practice that we've heard about. So in terms of myself, I'm not going to go on about me. You've got my information in the biography in the programme. Suffice it to say that I started out my career in this field 15 years ago as somebody working as an adult educator, going into the houses of ex-miners in the East Midlands, helping adults learn to read. That then developed into a career both at a regional level, then also a national level, and more latterly a European and international level in family learning. And in terms of my role at Peeple, I will be telling you later about the randomised control trial project that I've had the pleasure of project managing since last January. In the meantime, we're going to have a very, very quick overview of the programme that we have at Peeple. And particularly, so who are we at Peeple? So Peeple is a charity. We support parents and children to learn together from birth to school. We provide early intervention programmes and services for families, and crucially, hopefully many of you here have heard about the fact we deliver training for practitioners. Our most widely used programme is called the Learning Together programme, and we've got a stall at the back of the hall, and my colleague Lisa is here with me, so even after the conference, if anybody's got any questions, we've got all the curriculum in a big binder. You're more than welcome to have a flick through the 74 topics we have in there. Now, in terms of our approach, our whole ethos of the work we do is about building on the success of families that we work with. So when we're working with early years practitioners, we are constantly encouraging them to recognise where families are already implementing strategies in terms of, for example, sharing books with their children, where they're already demonstrating good practice, spotting those small things. You know that phrase we say, catch them being good? Yeah, that's where we come constantly with our approach. So it is very much about building on that. And in terms of the Learning Together programme, it is an evidence-based, flexible way in terms of enhancing the home learning environment, and crucially that early attachment, which we've heard today is so important in terms of book sharing and really getting the most out of that. So another aspect of the Learning Together programme and our approach at Peeple is that there are aims for both generations. When I trained in the programme 15 years ago, it was very child focused. There was not an adult learning slant very much at all. That is not the case now. So in terms of the aims for parents and carers, what we aim to do is to value and extend everyday learning opportunities. We want to improve the quality of the home learning environment, and people will have no doubt heard the big announcements nationally recently about the word gap and improving the home learning environment. And I am arrogant enough to brag that the televised visit by the Minister was at one of our sessions on our randomised control trial. So I'll just slip that in there. And of course, absolutely crucially, we're trying to develop secure attachment and relationships with babies and children, which again, we know in terms of sharing books is so crucial. And in the process, parents also have the opportunity to gain accreditation. based on their child's learning and development. Now, in terms of the children's outcomes and the aims for them, which are absolutely directly relevant, even if we just look at book sharing as an activity, we're talking about developing the personal, social and emotional development. Those interactions we know emerge from the process of book sharing. We're talking communication and language. We're talking early literacy. We are indeed, as Charlotte alluded to, also talking about early maths, because obviously, again, so much mathematical language going on and bringing that in. And of course, health and physical development. We all know that feeling, don't we, in terms of that feeling of being snuggled up, sharing a book. You know, it's a very new area, really, in the literature in terms of the mental health impact of that kind of book sharing. So, you know, that's all stuff that at Peeple we're really keen to look more at. So, in terms of our imagination library, before I just explain about the graph, we run an imagination library, as was mentioned in the introduction. So, our library in Oxford began in 2014, as was mentioned, in the Lees area of the city. Now, many people might have heard of the Lees because for many years it was the biggest council estate in Europe. So, a lot of deprivation in the area. And our charity is actually based, our work in England is based in the Lees area. So in 2015, we expanded the library to include not only children in particular postcode areas, but also those who are registered in our preschool that is on the estate. We give out the welcome book, which was mentioned earlier, The Tale of Peter Rabbit, when the parent registers at the preschool, so that they have a book right from that first moment of contact. And of course, the parents love the welcome letter from Dolly inside the front cover. You know, that's a real coup to have that effect. Now, many of those families that access the Imagination Library also link in with the kind of sessions you just saw. So that was our babies. That was an example of one of our babies groups. So our approach at Peeple has been very much about not seeing Imagination Library in isolation, which obviously it's got its own advantages, but very much today I've heard really creative ways where people are bringing together Imagination Library with other core business in organisations, and that certainly worked really, really well for us. Now again, for us, a key thing with Imagination Library, which aligns very well with our curriculum that we share with people on the training, is to really empower and build parents' confidence in sharing reading with their babies and children. Crucially, even when that parent themselves is not a confident reader. And that is really, really evident from the feedback we get that, you know, those parents that are involved with these groups, for example, they may not have confidence in their own ability, but they feel supported sufficiently to think, I can do this with my baby. So that's a really crucial aspect for us in terms of Imagination Library. Now, in terms of what's the point of this for us, when we think about our work in the Lees, we are absolutely focused, apart from sharing the joy of reading, which again has cropped up many times today, has it not? But we are definitely directly doing this with the vision of tackling underachievement and the factors surrounding that, so including poverty, unemployment and mental or physical ill health, which we know is all pervasive across society. Now, in terms of our work at the Imagination Library, we have found it's been incredibly popular. We do gather feedback, and the preschool itself also receives a book every month so that the children make that connection, that they see the book in the early years setting, but that is mirrored and that is replicated then in terms of what they are seeing in the home learning environment. So we are trying to constantly reinforce that familiarity and send that message that, you know, preschool is not somewhere you go and that's like a different world and your parents don't know what's going on. You know, it's about using those resources to actually bring that familiarity together. So in terms of how many families belong to the Imagination Library, apologies over here, I realise that I'm blocking you. So since the library began in April 2014, we've been reaching more and more children every year. So currently there are 556 children aged between birth and 4 that receive books compared to 484 in March 2017. And we also have 53 children who have graduated when they turn 5. Now the total number of books delivered to local families, which if you had a close look at the slides you would see, since we began is 13,396, and in this year alone we have delivered 6,278 books to families. So you can see that there is definitely that increase for us with the work. And it's really important, you know, just as on our training that we deliver, we have these Peeple principles, as we call it, which, as I say, happy to discuss that further with you. But in terms of our involvement specifically in terms of Imagination Library, I identified these two as being really crucial. So it's that thing around supporting confident readers in a way that is culturally sensitive and meaningful. We've heard that again a few times, haven't we, to families. But also influencing that love of stories and books. So that is like a stick of rock going through everything that we do. Okay, so just to again finish off with the context, this is what we call our strand map of our Learning Together programme. And you can see why our work with Imagination Library is really relevant to this. So we've got personal, social and emotional development, we've got communication and language, we've got early literacy, early maths and health and physical development. And all of these listed below are the topics. Now, if you looked at pretty much any of those topics, you would see how book sharing through the Imagination Library would really support any of those topics, and conversely, the effectiveness of the Imagination Library being implemented is also supported by the curriculum as a vehicle for that. So what I would say is, on a practical level, always look at it as a two-way street. See how each factor you're dealing with influences the other. And somebody mentioned earlier about feedback. We absolutely hold the voice of the child and the voice of the parent at the core of everything we do as an organisation. So in terms of comments from parents and children involved in the Imagination Library that people are involved with, a parent said, "The books have really helped my child's speech and language. It was delayed, but she has caught up. We read lots now." We have a preschool child saying, I love my books the postman brings. A parent that has English as an additional language made the comment, "We feel very happy to receive new books. My husband read book to my child and my child loved looking at pictures." And then also, this thing about having your name on the book, isn't that a powerful factor? Isn't that a powerful factor? And that people view this as such a powerful factor that back on the strand map with the topics, you would see we even have a whole topic on our programme dedicated to the importance of names. So we feel that fits again really, really well. Okay, so in terms of why I'm here, why have I been asked to give this presentation, apart from having worked in the field for 15 years, specifically my role since last January at Peeple has been as project manager of this Learning Together study. Can I just ask, has anybody in here heard about the Learning Together study? No, that's not surprising because the findings from the Learning Together study won't be published publicly until next spring. It's being evaluated by Queen's University Belfast. It's funded by the Education Endowment Foundation, who, as you may well be aware, will not invest in any kind of research like this unless there's a very high level of evidence already about the effectiveness. So we're all on tenterhooks at the moment, waiting for this report to be published on the EF website next spring, because can you imagine how powerful that would be to show even a mild positive effect for parents, but certainly for children? I mean, that could be a real game changer. You know, where we're always talking about where's the evidence, show me the evidence. So the reason I have such confidence, if we get a positive effect on this, is because of the sample size. We have over 1,400 families with 3-year-olds participating in this randomised control trial. Over 1,400. Now you look at the literature internationally and you are not going to find many studies with that volume of people involved in a randomised control trial. So it's mega exciting. So please, please, please check out the Peeple website. I'll give the details at the end. by all means contact me with questions you've got about the study, you know, because do you know what? Even if for any reason we get a neutral or a negative effect, God forbid, but if that happened, the point is that we are now able to have a dialogue within the sector about, well, why is that? Why would we get those results? Who do we need to discuss with this? So it's a great opportunity for us to get some traction around the evidence base. And you can see here that the outcomes that are being measured for the children, and book sharing is a key part of this randomised controlled trial. Because we've got 20 sessions being delivered, and book sharing is part of every one of those 20 sessions, it's going to give a really good indication about the impact, hopefully, of children's early literacy, language and communication skills. So what I would say is reach out at any stage to people. We're really, really happy to share our experiences of the study so far. And as we speak, Lisa, I think Queen's University Belfast have got researchers in all corners, haven't they, of the 139 schools across the country that we recruited to take part in the RCT. There you go, because Lisa's been covering this area, you see, so this is why Lisa's... Scotland. It was specifically England because it was Education Endowment Foundation funded. But as you'll be aware, people have lots of activity in Scotland, which we're also really happy to discuss with everybody. So I was specifically asked by Helen, as well as sharing our experiences from people's involvement with Imagination Library, to also explain about what is the research base. You know, we're involved with this randomised control trial, but what else is out there that we can, you know, I don't know, hang arguments on, reflect on, argue the case for in terms of book sharing? Why is it a good thing? Because I don't know about you, but I have not got hours on end every day to sit reading through peer-reviewed articles. Yeah? So this is my attempt at trying to bring to you some ideas for exploration in terms of bits of research that highlight good practice, great practice about book sharing. So to explain how I came to know about quite a lot of this literature, I was having a chat with Jeff last night, I think, at the reception, and I was explaining that through some social media interaction a couple of years ago, I got invited as me, rather than a Peeple person originally, to go to Arizona to speak at the conference that the National Centre for Families Learning organised. And I met great people there. What a great conference that was. Just the same feeling as I'll have going home from this as well. And one of the workshops I saw presented was by an organisation called Literacy Connects. So with Literacy Connects Reach Out and Read initiative, there was something I found particularly interesting in terms of book sharing. So what they were saying was, in terms of the specific interventions, what I'd advise is, you know, rather than go through everything now, by all means, you know, obviously if you Google this stuff, it'll show you the specific interventions. But with the Reach Out and Read initiative, they found that parents who had received a book as part of that initiative were more likely to report reading books with their children, or to say that reading was a favourite activity. So we know, don't we, if somebody says, oh, what do you enjoy doing? What's your hobby? If somebody is actually answering reading, that's a pretty good sign that there's something very deep-rooted. So I thought that was really significant. And what they also noticed in terms of book sharing was that the benefits of the initiative were pronounced, they were larger for families that were receiving what in America is referred to as aid to families with dependent children. So you know where we're talking about the Closing the Gap agenda, for example, and the whole pupil premium or early years pupil premium agenda. Again, there's a clear sign there that some work has been done around book sharing, and the fact that those impacts are actually really heightened, particularly for those families. In terms of the next one, so Every Child Ready to Read. This is something that's a collaboration. Again, it's an American one, which, as any of you that have known me over the years know, I've always, at national level, pointed out, well, of course we don't have the evidence, because there's not been investment in evidence. So a lot of the resources that I'm citing are from the other side of the pond, so to speak. But again, that's not to say that they're not useful, so I'm putting it out there. So Every Child Ready to Read was a collaboration between the Public Library Association and the Association for the Library Service to Children. And in their report, they talk specifically about how libraries can even physically change their space to enable book sharing. And the key message I picked up from their report, which I think is really relevant in the home learning environment and how we pass on messages about book sharing, was this idea that you're not compartmentalising books when you're sharing them. You know, to intermix toys with books and recognise that children will often vacillate between playing or reading, and actually that's an okay part of the process. In terms of building blocks to becoming a reader, this was from Read on Arizona, and if you look at their report, one of the really great things from a practical point of view, they give a timeline in terms of milestones around reading and language development, right through from birth in terms of sharing books, through to the age of 11 in terms of sharing chapter books. So again, as time is of the essence, you know, I won't go through the different milestones, but that's really worth checking out in terms of very practical suggestions if you're working with families with children of a particular age. In terms of the impact of family literacy on children, this is from the Goodling Institute for Research in Family Literacy. It was really talking about the primary role of parents as the first teachers and about sharing books right from infancy, improving phonological awareness, vocabulary, and the speech discrimination amongst languages as well in bilingual homes. And then finally on the list, the word gap from Lena. So this was very interesting in terms of the dialogue, in terms of even that physical space between a parent and a child sharing a book, that exchange visually. So again, I'd encourage you, particularly given the national announcements recently about the word gap, to look into that. And finally, the National Literacy Trust here in the UK, their report on book ownership and reading outcomes, they make a very stark statement which looks at it the other way round. They purport that without access to books of their own, young people are less likely to have positive experiences of reading, they are less likely to do well at school, and they are less likely to engage in reading. So our programme is based about the ORIM framework. Professor Peter Hannon and Professor Cathy Nutbrown from the University of Sheffield developed this. Again, all this is on our Peeple website, so I would encourage you to look at that. Be creative about the types of books that you're sharing. That's me and my dad. The most important book in my whole life was my dad's songbook. That changed my life, and we still get it out at Christmas every year. You know, so think about the different types of books. And I've also put on the slides, you know, maybe just look at that when you receive the copies of the slides, some points for reflection on book sharing. Think about what are those opportunities, what are those barriers, and crucially, what can you do through your work with Imagination Library and more broadly with families to enable greater book sharing. So, that's me, that's us, that's how you can reach out to us. Here for the rest of the conference. Really love to collaborate with you and hear your ideas and suggestions. So enjoy the rest of the conference.